So on today's tour, we're going to go to 3 different places. We're going to go to see the dam that's under construction. Then we're going to go to the reservoir intake and pump station. And then we're going to come back here and see the plant. So you'll be able to see all of those different components. If you've traveled along Highway 61 over the last year, you're well aware of the pipeline. And I'm happy to say that that pipeline is finally off of Highway 61. So traffic is back to normal there. We thank you for your patience during that entire period. This is the dam that's under construction, and the reservoir is actually going to be going back this direction. So when we drove down that hill, you would have entered the water at that point, and it's going to be a lake from this point back. We're standing right now at an elevation of about 895. The normal water surface level will be 910. So we will be in, there'll be 15 feet of water above us when the dam is full. So if you turn around and look, you can imagine everything at our level back, all the way back to the far tree line will be covered in water. Now you see a bunch of trees are still there, you'll notice. We did that on purpose. We wanted to wait to clear the whole pool of the reservoir until we're right about to fill it. Because if not, every time it would rain, we'd have to deal with 300 acres of uncovered material. So we tried to limit the clearing initially to the area that's needed. So the dam itself, you can see it's an earthen dam. It uses about 2.5 million cubic yards of soil. So a typical dump truck holds about 10 yards. So if we had to bring this material in from off-site, it would have been about 250,000 dump trucks worth of soil. So luckily, they're able to borrow areas on site and use that material here, so we're not having to bring any of that traffic out onto 61. The dam itself has a concrete core to it, a wall that runs down the center to prevent water from seeping through. And then additionally, in the bedrock below, grout was injected down 80 feet below the dam to prevent water from traveling under it. So there's a solid grout and concrete core that prevents water from seeping through. And then the rest of it is earth on top of that. The base of the dam is about 825 feet, and it's about 4,000 feet long when it's all in place. You'll see that structure out in the center, that tall concrete column, and then the 2 other concrete structures. There will ultimately be a bridge out to that center column, and that column will be used as an emergency overflow. In case too much water gets into the reservoir, it would flow through there and through a 60-inch diameter outlet pipe that goes downstream into Richland Creek. Now when we created this, we basically dammed up Richland Creek, which means Richland continues. So if we were to trap all of the water, it would dry up the creek downstream. So we actually use that outlet structure to release small quantities of water to keep the stream going downstream. I mentioned all the water coming in here is pumped up, but we recognize some of that we're going to have to release from there to go downstream. And the permit has certain requirements for temperature and water quality, so we have certain levels within that structure we can pull water off of. If we pull from too deep, it may be too cold, so we can bring it up closer to the surface. Right now they've placed about 2.2 million cubic yards of soil. They've got about 300,000 yards left to go. On a good day, they can do 14,000 yards. So we're within a month, hopefully, if the weather is good, to be able to get it done. And believe it or not, today is not an ideal situation, because when they place the soil, it has to have a certain moisture content. And one thing you notice today, it's dry. So the best situation is if it's raining like every 3rd day for about 1/2 inch. That keeps the soil moist enough to where they can do the work. What they have to do now is they have to spend a lot of time conditioning the soil, and you'll see water trucks. A lot of them are on lunch right now, but they have to constantly spray water out here to keep it the right moisture content, or else it gets really dry like we've seen. And the flip side of that is we don't want it to be too wet, because then they can't get the right compaction either. And this entire fall and spring, from like September through March, they got very little placement done, because if you recall, we were getting rain after rain after rain, and it was just too wet. So they're making a lot of progress. We're anticipating within the next month and a half, they'll be able to top it out and then they have to get all the grass established, wave protection, get everything ready to go, and then we'll be able to close the gate off and block Richland Creek and be ready to start bringing water in. The schedule for bringing water in is not until the fall time frame. That's when the pump station will be done on the Etowah. We'll start bringing water in and we'll fill it up at different levels. Because it's an earthen dam, the state really regulates how quickly we fill the dam. We can fill the first 30 feet of it as quickly as possible, so we could do that in probably 3 weeks. The next 30 feet, we can only do 2 feet per week, so that'll take about 15 weeks. And then the final 30 feet, because it's about a 90-foot depth, that has to be 1 foot per week, so that'll take 30 weeks. So from the time we start filling until it reaches its full pool, we're looking to close to a year to be able to fill it that entire distance. The whole time the state monitors the dam. This is a Class 1 dam, which is the highest level, similar to Allatoona Dam or Lake Lanier. This is the highest level dam that the state has, so it's very highly monitored. We couldn't ever allow trees or anything to grow on that. The public's not supposed to be on it, that type of thing. So the county ultimately will be responsible for maintaining the lake, both from the water supply standpoint, but then also from a recreation standpoint. The county owns the entire property around the lake, and part of the requirement is to have a 150-foot undisturbed buffer. So if you're out on the lake, you're not going to be able to see homes right up on it. People aren't going to be able to develop because the county owns the entire area.
And here we will have different levels that we can actually pull water from the reservoir, so that as the reservoir drops, if we're in a drought situation and the level drops, we'll be able to keep pulling water from lower and lower. When we get up here to the structure, and as you walk across this bridge, this is kind of open, so it'll feel high. But when the reservoir is full, we'll be about 12 feet above the water level. And the pumps that we see in here, they're vertical turbine pumps, but they're about, I think, 88, 87 feet deep. So they're really, really long. But we'll see all that as we walk across. So y'all are welcome to come on across the scary bridge. And each one of these pumps can pump up to 9 million gallons a day. And we, of course, have 3 ends, so there's 27 million gallons a day of flow possible going up to the plant. The total amount that we can actually pump from the river, if the level is up at a high flow, we can go 45 million gallons a day to fill the reservoir. The initial size of the plant is going to be 18 million gallons a day, so an instantaneous flow of 45, you can do your total day flow in less than a day, obviously, just by pumping faster. In the future, as we go to a higher flow rate, we have some additional spaces here to put more pumps, and we'll basically just mirror this, put 2 more in there. We'll have a total of 5 pumps in this building.
As Russell said, we're pumping water from about a mile, that last mile we drove, along the roadway, and the pipeline comes up into the front of this building here, and this is where the main treatment process happens. At the far end of the building, we add a coagulant, a chemical that basically destabilizes the water and takes all of the particles that are within the water and causes them to come together and start to form larger particles. Then passes into a zone that's called DAF, or dissolved air flotation. We actually inject tons of air into the water. The air attaches itself to those particles and float all those particles to the surface. And it creates a mat of solids of everything that was in the water. And that goes off to waste into that thickener. And the clean water comes here and goes into the filters. And so these will be dual media filters. It'll be sand and anthracite. And the water passes through, 5 feet of that media, and it pulls out any of the microscopic organisms that are within the water, and it comes out basically purified or cleaned. And then from here it goes downstream, and you can see those large blue tanks. Those actually have granular activated carbon, or GAC. So the same type of thing you would have like in a Brita filter. These are very large Brita filters, so the water pumps through those. It further cleans the water, and then it goes by gravity down chlorine is added to disinfect it, and it goes into that large white tank at the bottom. It's called a clear well, and that'll store about 6 million gallons of water. Paulding County, if you recall, I said uses about 12 million a day. So you guys are using 2 of those tanks a day worth of water. So we have some contact time to allow the chlorine to contact the water, and then it gets pumped that 13 miles down to the Highway 278 where it gets into the distribution system. There's a bunch of support activities to help that process happen. I said the solids go down there in that thickener. It basically raises the concentration of that sludge. It then gets pumped into that building that has a high-speed centrifuge, which is like a very, very fancy washing machine that basically spins the solids and removes the liquid. So what comes out of it is basically like dirt material, and then that gets disposed of. The building over there has all the chemicals that are used in the process, that coagulant I talked about, sodium hypochlorite, which is like a bleach that's used for chlorine, as well as fluoride for tooth protection, dental protection, and then those large tanks on the outside are actually lime. That's used for corrosion control and to raise the pH of the finished water going out in the system. I always laugh about bottled water because they try and do all these marketing ploys, right, about alkaline water. And, you know, we've been adding alkalinity for years to tap water, but now they do it and they call it, they charge an extra $2 a gallon, but anyhow. So don't get me started on that. So the water goes out in the distribution system. The facility has to be manned 24 hours a day. So there'll be a staff of about 12 people because you have to have multiple shifts. At a minimum, there'll always be 2 people on here at all times. The building directly across from us, you'll see when you leave, is an admin building. So there we have a laboratory where they do water quality monitoring. We have admin offices, we have locker rooms, we have a break room and a space, as well as a control room where they basically can control everything. I talk about bottled water. One of the benefits of tap water is that throughout this treatment process, there are online sensors that look at the water quality continuously all the way through the process. So if something's going wrong in the DAF unit, we would know it before it hit the filters. Something went wrong with the filters, we would know it before it hits the GAC. So there's all sorts of monitoring that has to happen continuously, real time, around the clock. Bottled water, it's completely opposite. They're regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. They do periodic checks. So they'll run, you know, a month's worth of production and then they'll do a check. And if something goes wrong, then they have to do a recall. And that's why you always see recall for chicken and stuff, because it's totally different regulations. So you should feel confident that the water that you're getting, every drop of it is monitored real time throughout the entire process. And the treatment process we're using here is very similar to the process that's used by Cobb County Marietta Water Authority. So you can expect a very, very identical water quality to what you have now. It'll actually be better because you'll be closer to the source now. You won't have as high of a water age as you had previously with Cobb Marietta Water Authority.